Top Trader is brought to you by Sanlam iTrade and powered by Perisys, now with a new Iris trading platform.
In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. That, of course, the famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, implying, of course, that life's unpredictable and change, of course, is guaranteed. Now, last week, we introduced an important game changer here on Top Trader. Trading costs must now be taken into account and realistic trading volumes must be traded. Of course, Narina, the trading cost aspect is just introducing the traders to the real world. Break down how costs have changed.
Absolutely. You know, in the early part of the competition, the traders were allowed to trade without any due consideration for costs. And costs really come in many different forms. There's the brokerage cost, which is negotiable, and depending on the platform on which you trade or through whom you trade, your brokerage costs could be negotiable. But then there are the regulatory fees and charges, those that have to be paid to the JSE, that have to be paid to Straight, that does the electronic settlement. It's got to be paid to the FSB, an investor protection levy. There's, of course, VAT also. You know, the taxman needs to get his hand in the kitty as well. And those are not negotiable, and they are typically based on the size of your trade, the volume of the trade that you're doing. And by introducing those, the idea really was to try and give you guys a much better idea of what sort of profits one needs to make in order to first and foremost cover your costs. But then secondly, of course, move on from there and say, right now I can start working for myself and not for the taxman or the JSE any longer.
So, of course, Gary, I think you had some views on the impact of trading costs, specifically on the difference between day trading and when you hold a longer position.
Yeah, I just think, costs are very important to trading in the real world. And when you're, day trading, movements in the day are a lot smaller than movements over longer periods of time. So the cost structure is very different in terms that you're usually taking more geared positions. So the cost structures there are, you're paying, depending on how many times you're getting hit to fill an order, maybe you're paying 20 Rand a hit. If you're playing in CFDs, you're paying maybe 0.35% on the spread, maybe a small brokerage cost fee. But and then obviously in the direct equities, you're paying full brokerage, full STT. So the cost structures are cheaper for the day trading or shorter term trading because you're dealing in more sort of leveraged positions. So it makes a big difference at the end of the day.
So what is the new rule, very quickly?
Right, so, as they say, change is inevitable, except maybe sometimes from a vending machine. But the changes that we introduced last time were the trading costs, differentiating between brokerage, and we charge them a flat rate of either 50 Rand per trade or 0.5% of the nominal amount that they are trading. And then there are the regulatory charges and costs, which is clearly laid down by the law. And as I mentioned before, those were introduced. In terms of the volume limit, what we said there is that you cannot on any single trade more than 10% of the volume that has already been traded in the market at that time also. So if you're going to be trading at 10 o'clock in the morning, bear in mind that there's probably going to be fairly little volume that is traded thus far, whereas if you're trading at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 10% of the volume up to that point is a lot more. And those were the changes that were introduced, and it certainly has resulted in significant changes in the performance as well as the rankings and the positions of the guys in the competition. Interesting, when we look back over the 6-month period and we look at the overall performance of the market in this time, as we stand today after 6 months in the competition, the All Share Index added 8.9% during this time period. So we also say to you that we're not going to be benchmarking you against the All Share Index, but rather the equally weighted All Share Index, for the simple reason that you had the choice of the 160 odd shares from which to choose, and whether it is a small or a big share that you're choosing, you need to see what the average in the market was able to do. Interesting to notice that average was only 6.5% during this time. A couple of months ago, when the market was struggling and not doing so well, what we found at the time was that the equally weighted outperformed the overall market cap weighted all share. But in these last couple of weeks where we've had the very strong bull run, it really has been the large caps that have been doing the heavy lifting and the pulling in the market, and that's where the all share index started outperforming the equally weighted index. Now, when we look at your performance, of course, we will be comparing it to that, but that is just one of many ways in which we will be assessing your performance and which will determine your fate in this competition.
Let's focus in on performance so far, and I suppose the various scenarios if we look at costs included and excluded.
Yes, as we mentioned, because of all the changes that came about, certainly what you're finding is that depending on how you evaluate the performance of the contestants, the performance looks quite different, both in terms of the nominal value of their portfolios, but also in terms of the ranking as we've got it. So what we've decided to do is to make it a bit interesting and just show you the impact of some of these differences, is to give you 3 different rankings today. Up until now, you've been used to seeing the rankings at the end of the show to see what the overall nominal portfolio values have looked like. So I'm going to start out there again and say, right, let's rank you according to your nominal portfolio size. So I'm going to start and ask you guys, as I call your names, please to step up, start the line from here and move down to that side. First and foremost, in the top rank position, purely from a nominal portfolio value point of view, I must reiterate that. Jared, will you please come and join me right here at the podium in front of Khwetse? Right. Saul, you are currently ranked in 2nd position in terms of the size of your portfolio. And Promise, you are still joining them as the top 3. Now, this might look to many people as a very familiar picture, but rest assured the picture is about to change shortly. Gary, you're in position 4 in terms of your portfolio size. Khwetse, if you can make your way around them, either behind or in front of them. And then the guy who doesn't have a good relationship with Mr. Market right now brings up the rear end. So this is the ranking of our contestants at the moment, purely based on the value of their portfolios. But we've mentioned that there have been these situations where actually some of them have been trading in volumes and positions that might not be achievable in a real life situation. So the second ranking that we're going to be looking at is to say we introduced all these changes a couple of weeks ago, and the guys have had to either adapt or die. Some of them adapted very well, and some maybe less so. And the interesting thing is that there is simultaneously a lot of change in ranking, but also very little. So in order to represent the new ranking, Jared, all I need you to do is to please walk all the way around and go and stand next to Mr. Market, next to Stephen. The rankings that you're looking at right now represents the performance on a nominal basis after costs were taken into account over the last couple of weeks since we introduced the changes. So although the positions might look very similar, you can see the impact that such a change can have on a contestant's position as well as their profitability in this market.
So let's slip in a quick question. Who wants to give a comment around the cost and the impact that that has on trading and your portfolio?
I think that from a portfolio perspective, it's more realistic, but also presents a number of challenges. Like I said before, that with earlier on in the day, I said to you, Sam, that you have to hold positions for a relatively longer period, and then the number of different factors that you try to weigh in. And personally, I found that I didn't actually sit and calculate some of the costs. I just calculated the brokerage, and I forgot to calculate a number of the other cost implications. But we'll have to wait and see.
There we go. So I suppose, Jared, costs have been a bit of a tough one for you. Very quickly.
Yeah, in terms of costs, I'm a system player. So when I heard, after playing the markets myself before this competition, when I heard that volume wasn't an issue, I jumped on the bandwagon and went pretty hardcore. Went very fast on that bandwagon, in fact. But yeah, I played the system, and that's what we were meant to be playing at that time.
I suppose, as you say, adapt or die, and there's a third scenario. It's not just about nominal value, it's also about returns.
Absolutely. So I think it's maybe time for you guys to take a seat again before we give the final ranking of today's show. You can sit wherever you want to. It's okay. It's not going to affect the outcome of the show. Don't worry.
Please look under your chair. The person who has the red flag under their chair will be leaving Top Trader. Anyway.
What we will be doing leading up to the final 2 weeks of the competition is that the performance of the next week, literally the next week, the percentage return that the contestants can generate after cost will determine who are the contestants that are going through to our final session of the top 3. Now, to give you just a taste of what that implies, and bear in mind that the time period is quite different, so there's no reason to assume that the rankings that I'm presenting now to you will represent the final 3, but it gives you an idea of how the changes and the different way of measuring portfolio performance can influence one's position in the competition and in real life. So I'm going to start with you, Stephen, this time round. I'd like you to stand up and maybe come and stand right next to the podium, right here next to me. No, you can stand on that side. That's fine. Right. Promise, will you please join Stephen right next to him? And the next one we've got next to Promise is Huetse. See how things start looking quite differently than they did previously. Jared, at least you're not the bread this time round, you are the middle of the sandwich. Please come and stand next to Huetse. And Saul, if you can then take your place next to Jared. And Mr. Slipper, if you would not mind taking the position on the other side.
Upgraded to slops today.
Summer has arrived. I think what is important from the rankings that you see in front of you today is that it highlights the extent to which the contestants have been able over the last 5 weeks to adapt to the changing market conditions. What's going to be crucial as we lead into the final stretch is who can exercise everything that they've learned so far and play the rules as they are now, Jared, to the best of their ability over the next week. And that will determine our final 3 contestants in this competition.
Well, there we go. That's how the top 3 are going to be selected. But right now, today's elimination is going to be based on historical performance on the nominal value of portfolios from the past 6 months. And Narina, it's over to you.
Well, you know, we started off the competition saying that some things will be very apparent and some things will be not so clear. I think it is fairly apparent for everybody who will be leaving us today. And although last week I can tell you that it's a man, I think I'm safe to say that it's a man. I'm also safe to say that he's under 30 years old and that he is a South African citizen. But jokes aside, you know, last week he had a very special immunity tie to save his bacon. Stephen, I'm afraid this time around. What? I'm sorry to shock you, Stephen, but you've been trampled by the bulls and mauled by the bears.
Stephen, I mean, you know, you moved to Cape Town, you moved from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and of course at the same time you've been playing Top Trader. Any life-changing moments within these 6 months, and has Top Trader meant any kind of moves for you into the trading world into the future?
Well, I mean, I've definitely gained a lot of insight into trading and even into investing throughout the show. But yeah, I mean, the move from Cape Town to Joburg, the main impact that has is I don't get hotel breakfasts anymore. But
was the accommodation so bad that you actually, in fact, had to move to Joburg?
Yeah, well, my mom does cook quite well. I stay with them for a while. I don't live with my parents. I just squatted there for a little while, having moved from Cape Town, but thank you for asking. I've been expecting to go for some time. I've been terminal for a while and I've accepted it was my time. I was surprised by that changeover where Jared dropped down right from the top. I thought he was really on point. I'd say it's probably a Saul and Gary show now.